Now that we've seen how to do a 2-column layout, let's move up one level and try a 3-column layout. For the 3-column layout, I've introduced an additional div. It's full of links, and what I expect to do is have the links appear on the left-hand side of the page as one column, the content to appear in the middle of the page as a second column, and then the author information stays out here on the right as a third column. But in order to do this, I'm going to need to do a couple things. I'm going to need to take the links and move them out of the flow of the document so that I can pull them up here using absolute positioning to the top. So let's go into Styles, and let's say for links, I want them to be positioned absolute. I want it to be down 120 pixels from the top. Remember, we still have to leave room for the header. Left, we'll just move them over 0 pixels. And let me also set the background color so we can see exactly where they're showing up. Background color of yellow. And there you can see our links. That's about the position that we want them. But I do want to make sure that this has a specific amount of width. We don't need a lot of width, but we can expect there'll be some textual content in there that will need some space to display. And now what I can do is this middle bit of content, I'm actually going to switch it over to allow it to be in the flow of the document and take the author info out of the flow and push it up to the right. So author info now has an absolute position. It also has to be down from the top 120 pixels, but now off of the right, we're going to position it right up there on the right-hand side, and we can still make the width of 300 pixels. The content area, we'll fix that up next. Let me take the background color, though, and set it to red just to see how things are overlapping. So you can see now we have some absolutely positioned content here, some absolutely positioned content here. What I really need to do is squeeze this content area into the middle. And I can do that by setting a margin left. And we can bring it over 105 pixels to make sure that the links area can display. And a margin right. We'll set this to 305 pixels and refresh. And now you can see that content is squeezing in there nicely between those two. Let's get rid of the background colors. And refresh. And we have a 3-column layout. One of the questions you might be asking when you look at this 3-column layout is, could I achieve the same effect using floats? And the answer is yes, generally speaking, you can. It all depends on what trade-offs you're willing to make. It turns out that the 3-column layout is one of the holy grails of CSS design. Everybody wants one, but we can never get 100% there. We can never have it behave exactly like we want it to behave under all circumstances. For example, with the absolute positioning that we've used, we can still run into a situation where if the user sizes the browser just right, you can have this image, which is very wide, start to overlap on some of the text or other content that's in the author info area. Now there are things you could do to try to solve that problem, like setting a specific width to that content area and then making sure all the images you have fit into that width. But for everything that you do to try to fix this, you lose something else. So if someone has a very large monitor and they're viewing this full screen and you've set the width of this content area to 450 pixels, then the page starts to look very small and there's a lot of white space on the screen. So everything that you do in CSS design, there's always some sort of trade-off when it comes to layout. But let's see how this would look using floats. What I want to do is say that the links are no longer using an absolute positioning. Instead, we want to float them to the left. Also, the author information, we're not going to use absolute positioning. We're also going to have it float to the left. And then finally, the content area will no longer need these margins. We want it to float to the left. And if I refresh the page right now, what we're going to discover is the content area is up here taking up all the space. down here at the bottom of the page, we have the author information and the links, and they're reversed. I want the author information on the right. So of course, when you're floating things, the order in which the particular divs or things that you're floating, the order in which they appear in the document becomes significant. So if I want the links to be on the left, I need to place that div ahead of the content. And now if I save everything and refresh, we come to the top, there's our links, but notice that the content hasn't floated up beside it. And it's always instructive to set background colors to try to figure out some of the stuff. So let's set the background color of content to yellow. Let's set the background color of author information to be aqua. Let's set the background color of the links to be red. And refresh the page, and you can see that part of the problem is that this content area is taking up 100% of the width. So let's do this. Let's say that links should have a width of 100 pixels. Content should have a width of, let's make it 600 pixels. And then author info we know needs a width of 300 pixels. And now I refresh, and as long as the page is large enough, everything can appear next to each other. One of the advantages to the floats here is that if you have an image and it's very large, it's never going to bleed over into the author information on the right, but at the same time, just using floats, if there's not enough space on the screen, you might have something that moves to the bottom of the page. Now, there are some great sources on the internet. If you just go out to your favorite search engine and do a search for CSS, 3-column layout, you'll find dozens and dozens and dozens of approaches to trying to achieve a 3-column layout. And typically, you can run the code that someone is presenting when they're showing how to do a 3-column layout, and you can pick one of the layouts that works best for the content you're trying to display.